Hello, everyone. We are back at McFly's Movie House yet again with me, Marta McFly. I am so glad to have you all listening today as I'm chatting to a very special guest. It's someone that, when I initially launched this podcast and was coming up with the list of filmmakers that I wanted to speak to, I put his name down first because the movie of his that I saw just blew me away. The film in question is 2022's Riceboy Sleeps, an intimate Canadian drama based in the 90s where we're introduced to a South Korean immigrant single mom and her son. And we watch as she raises her son in the suburbs of Canada. And she's so incredibly determined to give him a better life, all while dealing with the loneliness and even racism that comes with moving to a new country. The film has received rave reviews and awards on an international scale. It had its domestic premiere at TIFF, where it took home the Platform Prize, while it had its international premiere at the Busan Film Festival and won the Flash Forward Audience Award as well. So today I'm joined by the incredibly talented Anthony Shim, the writer, director, and one of the stars of the movie. Anthony, thank you so much for being on here today. I'm so grateful and congratulations on all of your success. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm good. I'm good. As I was saying to you before, I'm in Vancouver right now for a short time. It's really nice to be back home for a little bit. The weather's been amazing, and it's nice to
Yes.
see some friends. And I've been talking a lot about Rice Boy Sleeps lately because I've been seeing old friends that I worked on the film with, and it's been bringing back a lot of memories.
Oh, I love that. That's incredible. I also want to shout out very briefly what I still have, and that's the Rice Boy Sleeps
Oh,
lunchbox, which
yeah,
I
yeah.
still keep, yeah, in my little collection of movie things. It's always there.
Hmm.
So I'm so excited. And what was really interesting for me was I rewatched the movie, of course, before this episode, and I go to log it on Letterboxd, and what I was so happy to see was so many of my mutuals who are based all over the world have seen the film. They've given it so much praise. And other people who I know that haven't seen it, it was on their watch list, the top of their watch list. So it's just phenomenal to see for a indie Canadian film, I would say. So, before we get into chatting about Rice Boy Sleeps, because this podcast is a home for digging up hidden gems, I always ask my guests to highlight what they've watched recently and if they can recommend anything to our listeners.
Oh, what I've seen recently, to be honest, I haven't been watching a ton of movies because I've been researching and writing my next film. That's been
Mhm.
eating up most of my time. But the films that have really stood out to me in the last year or so that, as I've gone to a lot of different festivals and had a chance to watch lots of great independent films from around the world. I'll talk about ones that I don't think most people would know about because,
Okay.
I could talk about how great Zone of Interest is, but I think the whole world knows that fact at this point. So, a film that I really loved and was one of my favorites of that year that surprisingly not a lot of people know about is a film called Klondike. Have you
Oh,
seen it or
no.
heard of
I've
it?
I've never even heard of that. No. What is it?
It's a Ukrainian film, and it's about a husband and wife in a rural part of the Ukraine on the eastern Ukraine, and the setting is the backdrop of the film is when the Russians start to invade the eastern part of Ukraine, and it's just an incredible, devastating, intense film, and a very like it's very dramatic and highly engaging and I believe it premiered in Sundance 2022, I want to say, and it won a big prize there, and it was considered to be this great film, but everyone that I knew had seen it, but then it never really got to North America, and I just found that so strange, considering how relevant that subject matter
Yeah.
is at this current time. So that's a film that I've been talking about quite a bit and telling people to watch it. That's one, and then another film that I really love is a film from Indonesia. It's an independent film called Autobiography.
Okay.
That came out at the same time that Rice Boy Sleeps did, and that's a really wonderful film that I've been telling people to check out. And also, the filmmaker has become a friend of mine, so trying to get people to check out these lesser known independent films. Oh, another film, a really great documentary called To Kill a Tiger, which is a Canadian film.
Okay.
Did you see that one?
No, you're
No.
giving me a great watch list. I love this. What's that one about? Tell me.
To Kill a Tiger, it's a documentary set
Uh-huh.
in rural India, and it has to do with the young teenage girl who is sexually assaulted by a gang of young men, and it follows her parents, particularly her father's attempts to seek justice, and
Mhm.
touches on cultural and political challenges when it comes to that issue. It's really heartbreaking. I mean, the three films I just mentioned, they're pretty intense and pretty heartbreaking stuff. I mean, there's lots of other great films that I love that I haven't mentioned because everybody knows how great they're. Like one of my favorite films last year was The Holdovers.
Yes, of course.
But people know about The Holdovers already.
Of
So I'm
course.
picking the ones that I don't think a lot of people would have heard about.
The deep cuts. I love
Yeah,
that. No, I
yeah,
mean, listen, we have episodes on here that are on some pretty meaty and serious topics. So I'm definitely going to check these out, all three of
yeah,
them, especially that first one, Klondike, you said. That
yeah.
seems very, very up my alley. So thank you.
hmm
That's great.
it's incredible.
Oh, good. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe in a future episode, I'll be covering that. We'll see. So, Riceboy Sleeps, let's get into that. I know you've mentioned this in interviews before, but I really want my listeners to know as well. How did the idea of it come to be? From what I understand, it's based in part on your own childhood.
I've wanted to make films for a long time, but throughout my 20s, I'd really devoted my life to doing theater. And so I was directing and producing a lot of theater works. And during that time, I always thought, oh, when the time is right, I'd love to make a film. And and when that day comes, I'd love to make a film about my experiences growing up as an immigrant. And I grew up in Vancouver Island in the 90s. Because at that time, I had felt that I hadn't seen anything on television or on film that depicted the struggles and experiences that I felt that was authentic to me and that was accurate to what I had gone through. And so I had this idea, and then I was able to make my first feature film, which was something else, because it was just a much more manageable film to make on a very small budget. And I knew that Rice Boy Sleeps, it wasn't called that at the time, but I knew that this story, because it required having to go to multiple countries, that it would be a more costly film. So I ended up making this other smaller film first, and that allowed me to have meet people and have access to funding opportunities, which allowed me to make this film. Like you said, it is inspired by my experiences, and as I was making it, I didn't know how many people would see it. I didn't know if it would go to any festivals. I didn't know anything really. I just my goal was simple. I just wanted to make sure that if Korean immigrants or Korean Canadians, or Korean Americans, or Koreans in any part of the world outside of Korea saw the film, that they would feel that I've done their stories justice, that I've depicted the lives of Korean immigrants in an authentic and honest way. And I try to be as specific and personal as I could. And surprisingly, and it was a real surprise to me and everyone who worked on it, how so many people from all around the world have watched the film and have said, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say to me, like, obviously I'm not Korean, but that character is me, or that character is my mom. And it really, I think, is a testament to how universal films can be and stories can be if you make it from an honest place.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I mean, I come from an immigrant family as well. I wasn't born in Canada, and so many moments in the movie spoke to me too, as well. So yeah, I think you're right on the money. It is very universal, and I want to highlight as well Yoon. She just blew me away in the role of Soo Young. She truly shines, and I think she became one of my favorite movie moms ever. She's just incredible. The weight that she carries, especially during that first act when David is young, and the lengths she goes to hide her own pain and try to give her son the best life she can. And she delivers some powerful lines, like the moment she tells her son the three moments a man is allowed to cry in his life. So I'm wondering, were these moments where she passes on this life advice to her son based on what your mom told you when you were younger? Because it all seemed very honest and powerful.
Well, that in particular is something that was said quite often growing up. I was told that by my grandparents. I was told that by my parents, more so my mom. So it's a pretty common thing that used to be said in Korea back in the day. I don't think it's said as often nowadays,
Mhm.
but it is a really interesting what would you call it, sort of guidance or advice for a parent to give their child. And looking back now, yes, I mean the character is. I wanted to people ask me, people think that that's a carbon copy of my own mother, and it certainly is not. Although there are many inspirations that I've taken from, things my mom have said or done in the past, but it is not, it's not I haven't used this character to portray my mom on screen. What I
Gotcha.
really wanted to do was try, try and show an Asian female protagonist on screen that had nuance and depth and complexity that so many other great protagonists in other films have. Because I just didn't a lot of a lot of the times when you see Asian females in movies, especially Hollywood films, they don't have much dimensions to them. They're either subservient, or and meek and quiet, or they're like the Dragon Moms, and like or they're it's kung fu movies, or it's completely wacky comedies where they're just goofy. But I wanted to show a woman who was all of those things, could be funny, and was tragic, and was flawed in many ways, and someone who was full of love and full of doubt. And Singin Yoon obviously, did such an incredible job. It was her first audition, it was her first real role
Wow.
as an actor. And I had seen so many actors audition for that role, and when she sent in her tape, it was just so obvious that she was that person. And so we were incredibly blessed with the casting of that role, but also everybody else, and the two boys. I was really nervous that we weren't going to find the right actors for those roles, but we found them. They existed, and we created this fictional family together, and then really and developed a genuine bond and a love for one another, which I think translated onto the screen. I still stay in touch with them. I
Oh,
spoke with Noel's dad today. Um,
oh, nice.
so Ethan still calls me from time to time.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been a really remarkable experience and journey.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm also
Mhm.
curious, the Korean folktale that we hear told in the film, was that a story that you grew up with yourself?
No, that was not something that I was aware of. It actually came up. I wrote the script during COVID, and so I saw my mom a lot because we couldn't really see anyone outside of our immediate family at that time. I had written the first or second draft. My mom had read it, and so she knew what I was working on, and she knew the types of things that I was researching and looking into. And at the time, I was really interested in old traditional Korean music and art and paintings and pottery and old traditional foods and clothing and all these things. And as I was digging into them, my mom introduced me to this Korean. I guess it's like a form of it's the Korean equivalent of opera. And in that story, in that sort of musical story, it's the folktale that's in the film. And I watched this incredible performance on screen, and then I asked my mom, "What is that story that they're singing?" And she told me the story of Goruchan, which is in the film. And hearing it, I just thought, "Oh my God, this is incredible!" Because I'd been working on an ending where the two of them are going up this mountain to go see the father's grave, and I thought, oh, there's a parallel here, and I think there's a feeling, there's a meaning behind this story, this folktale that I think lends really well to the world that I'm creating. And it also became, I was trying to figure out how the character was going to reveal her
Hmm.
secret
Yes.
to the other character. And I
Hmm.
thought, oh, what an interesting way to reveal that instead of just saying, hey, this is what's going on. And so yeah, that folktale really, I got to thank my mom for that one. She really saved me with that.
Yeah, It fit in so organically into the story. It really, really did. And I noticed it even more during the second rewatch how, yeah, just how seamlessly it worked with your story. So, yeah, that's thank you to your mom, as you said. I'm also curious, when you were writing the script, was it therapeutic for you, just unearthing these memories, even though they weren't necessarily a carbon copy of what was in the movie?
If it was, I wasn't cognizant of it.
Okay.
That was not the purpose. It was not a goal of mine to work out my
Hmm.
past problems.
Yes.
I am, through making this film, I think I've learned so much about myself, my own relationship with my background, my Korean background, and I've learned so much about my family through the research that I was forced to do. My mom and I had many conversations as a result of this film that we hadn't in the past, and in a really organic sort of way too. It wasn't me, sitting my mom down going like, "Tell me about, this moment in our lives." It was just the conversations just came up, and I think it just opened up a lot of our ideas and questions and memories. I would have to say yes. I mean, yes, it has been therapeutic, but it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still kind of benefiting from this film, and a lot of really great stuff also came from conversations with people who saw the film, and learning about others allowed me to learn more about myself. But I assure you, I am still just as troubled as I've ever been in terms of trying to find security and peace within myself.
That's see, that's I mean, that's I feel like a lot of artists just will always
Hmm.
have that sort of troubling nature, let's call it.
Yeah.
But to move on, one of my favorite things in cinema is using food as a means of connecting with others. And I think that you do that so well with Riceboy Sleeps. Multiple occasions, you have that scene with David and Soo-young, and as she's making kimchi, and he had a rough day at school, and she gets him to try some, or their shared dinners together, or the family meal and drinks in Korea when they're there. There's just tons of examples, and what you do is really clever, I think, is you use food as a tool to communicate separation between cultures, but also as a way to bring people together. You do both. Like when David brings his mom's food on the first day of school, and what happens there, that's heartbreaking to me. So I'm curious, besides the obvious physical fuel that food gives, what does food and sharing food mean to you? And what does it express? And do you consciously use it as a tool in film?
I don't know. I mean, I I think it's because food means so much to me as a person in my real life, and I think, people talk about like different ways of how people express love, and some people do it by touch or gifts or what. I do it by food, and anyone who knows me well have experienced that. And food was always such a big part of our family, my extended family as well. That's what brought us together. And and as I grew up in Canada, my relationship with Korean food, which I have such a deep love and a passion for, really went through a lot of ups and downs. There were times where I just didn't eat Korean food. There were times where I was ashamed of it, embarrassed of it. There was times I would recoil from it, or I would eat it in secrecy as I was, as if it was like this bad thing that I was doing. And so it was something, I just thought that was a really interesting way to show one's character's relationship with his ethnicity,
Mhm.
by doing that. But my first film had a ton of eating as well, and the script that I'm currently writing has a ton of food scenes as well. I think it's something that is so on my mind all the time. I actually there's a point when I was writing my Swiss Lease where I actually had to change some scenes because I realized, oh my God, like maybe three-quarters of the movie people are eating. People are always eating in this movie. So I thought I have to find other activities besides just eating. But yeah, I think it's a really great tool in cinema,
Yes.
and it's also visually exciting. It's the way it looks, it it forces actors to have behavior. And then what I learned actually, this is interesting. I After Yun was cast, and her and I would talk about various things about the script and the character. She asked me if I knew what the word family meant in Korean. The word for family is 식구,
Okay.
and Then I said, well, it means that word means family. Like I don't understand I don't, I'm not sure what you mean. She goes, the word 식구 actually means, those who eat together, those who share
Oh,
food together. I thought, oh, what a beautiful word that is.
wow.
That family actually means those who eat together. And I think because Korea was a country that was so poor for much of it, so much of history, and food was not an abundant, was never abundant until recently, obviously, that rice and food had carried so much value. And so anyone who was willing to share that with someone else, was considered family, even if they're not blood related. So I thought that was a really beautiful thing. And I thought, okay, maybe there is a way to then use that idea into this film. And so there's scenes where, the character So Young is eating with her coworkers. To me, I mean, those people that she's working with, they are as much of her family as anyone else in the world. Just like so many of friends and family friends that I grew up with are more family to me than a lot of my actual blood relatives because we've shared so many meals together, so many holidays together. The key moments of my life, they were there to witness and share. So, I really wanted to try and play with the idea of family and home within the story, and food was something that was really a great tool to use.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that word. That's I had I mean of course I had no idea, but that is very very cool. Wow. I'm also wondering what are some of your favorite food movies? You said you're a big foodie. I know for me I love Tampopo and Eat Drink Man Woman. So, what are yours?
Tempo was great. Oh man, you put me on the spot. Food movies,
Sorry.
food, food movies. What are some good? Oh, the filmmaker that really allowed me to just double down on the use of food in my films is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, Ho Shen.
Okay.
Are you familiar with his films?
No, maybe if you list a few movies of his, maybe I will be.
Ho Shen is a Taiwanese filmmaker who
Uh-huh.
made a lot of film. Most of his films were made during the late 70s and throughout the 80s and even into the 90s. And he was a part of the Taiwanese New Wave, along with
Mm.
filmmakers like Edward Yang. And
Yep.
I think during that time in the 80s, Taiwan and along with I think Iran were making some of the best films in the world. And
Hmm.
Ho Shen made a couple of films a handful of films that I just absolutely adore. And there's a film called Dust in the Wind.
Okay. I think I've heard of that.
I would say that was one of the biggest influences and references that I used for Riceboy Sleeps,
Oh,
in
wow.
terms of pace, framing, editing, and the use of food. He
Okay.
uses food in a lot of his films also in a really wonderful way. And there's a film called Flowers of Shanghai that he made, where the whole film takes place in a brothel. And
Mhm.
I can't remember exactly what the period was, but it's a long time ago. And there's a lot of food eating scenes in that film. And apparently, Ho Shen had a kitchen built in the on the set where the art team would have to make food that was
Wow.
fresh. Like that was actually, it wasn't just
Yeah.
sitting in a container somewhere, but it was actually being cooked on the set so that there's scenes where food is being brought out into the scene and it's steaming and it's
Wow.
actually edible and people are digging into it and enjoying it and interacting with it in a real way. And I just think it's so great when you see that it just pulls you into that world. There's such a realism to it and just visually too, just to see steam and all that different those colors and the texture. It just adds so much life to the frame. And so that, yeah, he is a big inspiration for me in that sense.
Wow.
And yeah, his films, Dust in the Wind, City of Sadness, Time to Live and Time to Die. I mean, and these are Puppet Master. These are some of the really great films of all time that, I encourage a lot of people to see.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, now that's all those films are shooting up at the top of my watch list because I am familiar with Edward Yang, but his films I haven't seen at all. So that's the way you describe it as well with the cooking, the fresh cooking being made on set. That actually
Hmm.
reminds me a bit of Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, as I mentioned, because the same thing was done. I think they had
Hmm.
multiple chefs on set to make all the food. So I'm a big foodie too, so
Yeah.
this is good for me. But back to your movie, how was the film received in South Korea when you showed it? Because I was reading an interview where I believe you said you were nervous to screen it there.
I was probably the most nervous screening in Korea because the reaction of the Korean people meant something to me
Hmm.
on a personal level. In the past, a lot of films, and it's not like our film was a huge box office success or anything, but when we first premiered it at Busan, because I knew that a lot of films that have to do with Korean people made in other countries didn't always do well, weren't always the most well received. So I was nervous that my film may fall into that category as well. Yeah, so I mean, I didn't know if people would boo it. I didn't know if people would be offended by it. I didn't know if people would walk out of it. And there were all possibilities, but luckily the reaction, the response was very positive. And as you mentioned earlier, we won the audience prize, which was, a really great sort of reassurance that okay, no, people did really enjoy it. It wasn't just
Yes.
it wasn't just talk, and we had a good run, theatrical run there, and I still get recognized from time to time on the street
Wow.
from Riceboy fans. So yeah, no, it was really special to have the film be embraced by people living in Korea. And it was interesting. In Korea, it was particularly younger women who really were passionate about the film.
Wow.
I found that different countries, different cultures, I could tell different demographics would get really passionate about the film. But in Korea, more so, yeah, it was more so the younger crowds that got
Hmm.
really excited by it, that were really, passionate, became passionate fans.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic to hear. What were some of the other reactions screening the film abroad, South Korea aside? Did any like countries stick out to you in terms of audience reactions?
Of the countries that I've gone to personally and screened, Morocco is
Uh,
Marrakesh. We were at Marrakesh, and that was a festival that I was really shocked by the audience reaction, and it was a mix. It was older men and women, younger people. It was across the board, and people were really really passionate about the film and its subject matter, and I didn't know that there's a huge immigrant population in Morocco.
hmm.
And I think there's a lot of similarities in the culture as well that I never knew about. So it's really cool to see people in Morocco be as passionate as they were. I didn't go, but I heard it did really well in Scotland.
Oh,
It was a big hit in
wow.
Scotland.
That's great.
Yeah. Where else? Oh, Australia. It was well received in Australia. Yeah, the film did really well in Israel. And yeah, like the territory that had the best theatrical run was in Belgium.
Oh,
Yeah,
huh.
which we're going like, what's going on over there? Why why are people going to see this movie so much? But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, how do you explain that? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
I
mean,
don't I don't know
that's
why.
what that's what I mean when I saw it on Letterboxd.
Hmm.
It's everywhere in the world.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a good movie.
And then it's interesting, certain cities and countries that I've visited where the film didn't go over so well. Or just the
Oh,
reaction was just lukewarm. I'm not gonna name which ones, but it was
I'm not gonna
interesting. I
ask it.
thought, yeah, I thought I would have thought it would do really well in this territory or this country, but no. And who knows? How do you explain that?
Huh. Well, Belgium. There you go.
Yeah.
That's great. What was your favorite scene to film and why?
Favorite scene to film? It's got to be stuff in Korea. I loved filming in that open space in nature. Because in all the stuff in Canada and Vancouver that we shot, it was all in such cramped spaces. We were all, for the most, a lot of times we're just indoors, and intentionally too, we wanted to be in cramped spaces and really give a sense of make the space feel claustrophobic for the audience as well as the characters. And so by the time we got to Korea, it was just so freeing to be in this open space, and we didn't have to worry about lighting or noises. It was just the nature, and our lighting was the sun. And by that point, the actors were so dropped into this characters because it had been months of playing this role, and our camera team was so in sync and tuned with what I was wanting, and everything just went so beautifully there. So I think the stuff we shot outdoors in the rice fields, probably my favorite. I don't know if I enjoyed it that much while filming, but my favorite scene to watch to this day is the one where they're in Korea and they're having lunch with the
Yes.
grandparents and the uncle. There was something about getting to that point where I was so comfortable in just being simple about the filmmaking. And we've done so much stuff where the camera's always moving and trying to come up with really interesting ways to shoot things and frame things. And then by the time we got there and seeing the actors, and then I was really happy with the writing. I felt the dialogue was really organic and it flowed well and didn't feel like it was pushing anything, and it's fun, and the actors are so great. It was the first time the five of them had met in real life, and they just
Wow.
had such a great chemistry. I think certain people thought, let's try to make more of the scene, and I just kept saying, no, 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 this isn't now. This is now. We don't have to do more. So much is happening on screen in the simplicity of that, and the simple act of sitting around at lunch, a very basic lunch table together. So I still, that's the scene that I always enjoy watching, even for the thousandth time.
Yeah, I love that scene too. I would say for myself as well, that part in Korea is probably my favorite as well. Yeah, so Riceboy Sleeps, shot on 16 millimeter film by Christopher Liu. Absolutely sublime. As you mentioned, the colors in Korea, or just the colors in general, are stunning. Even in Canada, I just really liked how it was, how the colors were shown. And I also want to highlight the aspect ratios in the film because they change. And the Canadian sequences are smaller, where I'm actually very pleased that you said claustrophobic earlier because the way those sequences were shot, even visually, looked like a box. And then it goes wider in Korea. So, yeah, this definitely, I would assume, had that significance as well of shooting in that smaller frame in Canada for our characters to perhaps feel boxed in, I would say. Is that correct?
Yep, I would say that. And the idea originally came from speaking with, I mean, this actually came up in several conversations with several people, but speaking with not only Korean immigrants, but also Chinese immigrants who had been living in Vancouver for a really long time. And then, and we would speak about certain parts of the city, for example, like English Bay or Kid Speech and stuff like that. And I would talk to people who've been living here their entire lives or for decades and have never been to some of these places. And
Wow.
even my own parents, they, my mom says all the time that, she was never able to really fully appreciate the beauty of our surroundings when she was
Mm.
raising us because she had blinders on, and it was about the day to day survival. Get the kids fed, get them to school, work, get home, house stuff, try to get enough sleep, work again, and it's just, and on the weekend, if you have a bit of time, you catch up on things around the house, and once in a while we go on a small little camping trip. But I think that the kind of life that a lot of families lived, or the previous generations lived, they didn't get to really never got to really fully take in their surroundings. So I wanted to create that feeling that she's
Hmm.
only seeing this much of her environment, and have also the
Wow.
audience feel that in some way as well. I was really hoping that that transition, because you do get used to that aspect ratio after a certain amount of time. At first, you go, "Whoa, it's so boxy," and then 10 minutes goes by, and you forget, and you just accept that aspect ratio for what it is, and then and just when you forget, and for the film to open up suddenly, I wanted I wanted the audience to feel that sense of relief and that freedom that the characters are feeling along with them. So it was a bit of a gamble. We didn't know if it would work or not, but we tried it, and then we were pleasantly surprised that it was as effective as it was. Yeah, and so much of the visuals, the colors, the camera work, yes, Chris is, he deserves all the credit in the world, but it's also we had an incredible camera team and a lighting team. Our colorist, Dave Tomiak, who worked with us from day one on discussing exactly what the color palette would be and how we were going to achieve the look we were going for and the contrast between Canada and Korea. These were not accidents. These were carefully thought out and meticulously prepared and executed. And along with, our production designer and the rest of our art team, they created that world. And yeah, and so it all just came together so wonderfully. And anyone who's made a film knows it's never one person. You do have to get lucky in being able to assemble a group of really talented people who are like-minded and are able to work towards the same goal.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy that I got a chance to ask you about this because I mean visually it just blew me away. And I would even say that those nature scenes that you mentioned as well in Korea, those kind of reminded me of the movies of Terrence Malick. They were just breathtaking, and it's just I applaud you for it, definitely. So visually, that's the vibe that I was getting, inspiration wise, perhaps, and then emotionally. I was getting very similar sensations that I get when I watch a Yasujiro Ozu family drama, just the tugging on the heartstrings, where it's simple, but he's saying so much and you're saying so much. And it was the same sensation as well, where I just want to go and hug my parents and never let them go. And I'm just wondering, were these filmmakers an influence for you, or are they ones that you admire and watch? And if not, do you have any ones that you could share?
I mean, those two filmmakers in particular, they're such big influence on me. It's almost embarrassing to even talk about or mention their names. Chris and I both are such big fans of Terrence Malick's films, and especially the way he shoots his movies. I think neither of us wanted to bring up his name because, I mean, trying to mimic
Sorry.
Terrence Malick is almost like it's almost like cheating. It's almost lame. And at a certain point, we were just like beating around the bush because we were clearly making Terrence Malick references without saying Terrence Malick. And then at a certain point, I just said, like, I think we have to address the fact that we both are really inspired by those films, and we acknowledge it. And yes, there's a lot. There were times where we're actually actively trying to get away from making it feel like a Terrence Malick film because I think we're so heavily influenced. And yes, Yasujiro Ozu is a filmmaker that I love and admire so much. And the lunch scene that I mentioned earlier. I
Hmm.
mean, that's really my pathetic attempt to mimic an Ozu scene. And I really resisted copying him, but that scene, I thought, okay, I gotta do it. It feels
Yeah,
appropriate. And yes, to this day, I watch his films all the time, and it's as a sort of
same.
reminder and a reference to how just simplicity can achieve so much, and just allowing actors to behave within this space can do a lot of the work, do a lot of the heavy lifting. Yeah, you called me out. Yeah,
No.
those two filmmakers are, yes. I mean, there's so many, but those two in particular, along with, as I mentioned earlier, Ho Shen
Hmm.
are,
Yep.
are some of the bigger,
Bigger
yeah,
names.
influences.
No, I'm so happy that I was on the money with the Ozu because I'm such a huge fan myself, and that scene that you brought up especially, that really reminded me. We actually just recorded an Ozu episode this morning. So
Oh,
maybe
really?
that's why it's so fresh in my mind. Yeah, yeah, we covered the Noriko trilogy. So that's
Okay.
going to be coming out a bit before yours, but that's great. That's great. I also want to touch on the score by Andrew Yong Hoon Lee, I believe his name is, which combined
Hmm.
with those visuals, it's just so perfect at conveying this dreamlike, hazy nostalgia, I would call it. It's wonderful. Did you, or what did you tell Andrew to do when it came to crafting that score? Did you tell him about any emotions that you wanted to convey?
I didn't know Andrew prior to this. I
Oh,
One of my producers mentioned I should check out his work because he had scored this one other documentary. that our sound designer had also done, that I had
Mm.
also did. And I checked out his work. Andrew's an artist, and but he also creates music. And I came across his stuff online, and I loved it. I thought this is exactly the kind of feel that I would like to have for Riceboy Sleeps. And while I was writing, his music sort of became the soundtrack of the world as I was writing. And so then when the script was ready, I just cold emailed him and I said, "You don't know me, I don't know you, but I'm a fan, and this is what I'm doing. I would love for you to consider doing the score for this film. And we have no money, but I hope you'll do it anyways." And and then he got back to me and he was intrigued by the project. And we never talked about music. We talked about everything else for weeks and months, hours and hours and hours, about everything, but never really about music. I mean, we talked about like traditional Korean instruments, but we never talked about, using. I never told him, this is a song or a musician whose work I want it to sound like this, or I never gave him direct references. And if anything, I told him that I didn't want to create songs, but more so I wanted to create a soundscape where the score and the sounds that are happening within the environment just kind of coexist together, and take you on
Hmm.
an emotional journey throughout the whole film, and can help the audience experience the underlying emotions of these characters. And we connected on so many things. We had a mutual interest, and we're asking the same sort of questions about our identities as Korean Canadians. What it means to be the son of immigrants, and becoming a father, and thinking about the next generation. All these things. We were pondering the same questions, and we essentially used this film to delve deeper into those questions. And then when the time came, I would cut 10, 15, 20-minute segments, and I send them to him. He would then, a week or two later, send me a bunch of music. I would obviously love them and then just plug them into different parts of the movie. And that was that. There was
Wow.
never any notes. I didn't give him notes, or we never went back and forth on trying to find the right, version of a song. It was just everything just worked because
Wow.
he knew, he was so right, and he was so locked into the world that we were creating, that I'm sure, if you asked him, he might talk about it. It might have been a much more of a difficult process for him, but to me it seemed really effortless, because he just kind of pumped out these, beautiful tracks, and they fit so perfectly. I think the most notes I really gave him was like, can this sound just be louder, or can we have 10 more
Mm.
seconds at the end so it fits into the scene? But that was
Wow.
it. Yeah, it was one of the most exciting and fun creative collaborations I've ever had with anyone.
Wow. Oh, that's very special. It sounds very special. You also mentioned earlier your background in theater, and I read somewhere that you treated the set and shot this as a theater production. So I'm curious, what does that entail?
What does that entail? Well, I mean, the rehearsal process began months before because of COVID, and our lead actors didn't live in Vancouver. A lot of stuff happened over Zoom, and we discussed things and we worked things out through conversation initially, the same similar way that one might in preparation of a theater production. And then when they got to Vancouver, we had about 3 weeks of rehearsals. And some of the bigger scenes, we would mark up our rehearsal space and put in temporary, furniture pieces, and we blocked it all out. We worked out all the moves, we worked out the timing, and so then I could adjust the writing if it was necessary. Then Chris came in later on, and he would watch the rehearsals, and we would work out the camera moves with the actor. So because the camera had to, the choreography of it all had to be in sync. It wasn't because the camera is shooting in real time, and because most of these scenes are happening without uninterrupted, without any cuts, that it had to be like a scene in a play where from we
Right.
know how we're getting into it and we know how we're getting out of it. And so I told Chris, I said, you got to think of yourself as essentially another character in the scene, and you have to be connected with the characters and work with the actors in capturing these moments. And of course, Chris was wonderful and excited to do so. And then on set, you have rehearsals, for the crew so that everyone knows what's going on. In rehearsals for theater, at least in the way I like to rehearse, whoever's on stage rehearsing, that is the most important thing that's going on in this space. And everyone that is in the space, our attention is on them. You're not
Mhm.
doing other stuff while they're rehearsing. You're not on your phone. You're not having a conversation. You're not eating. We are watching what's happening. And if you don't want to watch, you don't have to be in the room. But if
Mhm.
this is important to you, if this is important for you to know in order to do your job well, then we're all going to give them our attention, which is great because then the actors feel like they can take their time, they can relax, they're being supported by everybody on the set and aren't having to compete for attention with people on ladders or people on walkie-talkies, but that we are working as one unit. And of course, in order to do that, you have to be really, really well prepared and well organized time-wise. And so that process was so important to me and will always be important to me that everybody involved made sure that, okay, like you get your time to do this part and you get your time to do this part and you get all the time you need. But when you are done, we are moving on and you don't get to tinker anymore because now it's about that next department or it's now about the actors. And I think that allowed for us to be able to capture performances that felt organic and natural and spontaneous. And that's how I've grown up working. And I don't really care to work any other way. I think it's being the most respectful to each and every department by allowing them to have their time and space.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. It also just fosters this, as you were saying, sense of equality as well. That, as you mentioned, by the time you guys all got to Korea, it was just you all knew each other so well and everything was flowing well, as you said. So that definitely was an influence, I would say. So, yeah.
Hmm.
If you could change one thing about the filmmaking industry, what would it be?
Oh, one thing, the filmmaking industry. Do you mean in North America or Hollywood or the world
Oh,
or because
good
it's all so
question.
different.
I meant in a broader sense, but maybe you could give me maybe one for Hollywood and maybe one on a smaller scale.
I wish there were more opportunities for young people who want to get into the film industry to have access to more on-set experience, more on the job experience as a way of learning. I suppose I'm referring to, I guess, like the film equivalent of like an internship type of thing as a way of learning, and for that to be financially feasible for the productions, and so that people are able to learn in different ways and not just through film school because as I understand, film school is a tremendous way of learning about filmmaking. I don't think it's the only way. I don't think it should be the only way. And to me, I see a great value in having gone to film school from the people, from friends and people that I know who did, are the connections you make, the friends you make, and 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 the access to the resources that you have. And so, for those who can't afford to go to film school or don't do well in structured education school settings as I didn't do well in those environments. If we could find ways for there being more opportunities for people to be able to learn, just kind of like if you look at like restaurant industry, for example, like
Hmm.
one is able to get in, with zero experience and work your way up. If we could create a pathway for people who want to become filmmakers to be able to kind of learn and see it on the job, because some of the greatest lessons I learned was by being on set, shadowing someone, or being on set as an actor and watching how different independent filmmakers work. Yeah, because there are as many ways to make a film as there are movies. That's not my quote. I heard that someone else say it, but I think it's so true. Sometimes in certain places that I won't name within the industry, people go about making films as though there's only one right way to do it. And I think that's really unfortunate because this is an art form, this is a creative process, and we have to continue to always challenge and question and explore and push the limits of this medium and this craft. So I was that's I guess what I would change. I mean, if you really and then there's plenty of things that I could get into about things I'd love to see change. I won't get into that because I don't want to get in trouble.
No, I
We'll
think
talk about this in
that's a
private, off
wonderful.
camera. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
I think that's a wonderful answer. This is a question I always like asking filmmakers because it's funny. The answers I get are usually kind of similar. And I think this is the first time that someone's giving me the answer that you gave, more opportunities for learning, which I think is important as well. So yeah, I love that. And last question for you today. You mentioned kind of a little bit what's on the horizon for you, your next film that you're doing in Korea. Can you chat a little bit about that? I don't want to
yeah, yeah.
rock the boat
It's
too
public
much.
information.
Hmm.
I am adapting a novel, and a novel that's about a Korean American Wall Street banker who is sent to Korea during the Asian financial crisis as a part of a rescue team to help the Korean government overcome their debt crisis. It's a book that was brought to me right after I finished Riceboy Sleeps, and it was the people involved, the production companies involved, and the subject matter and the scope of the story and themes that it explores that just I couldn't pass it up. I was really set on these two scripts that I had been working on my own that were original stories of mine, but this book came along and I just couldn't say no. And so because it is much bigger in scope and scale and it deals with characters and settings and times that I am not so familiar with, such as, the international finance world and in Korean politics. I had to do a lot of research, and part of the reason why I'm living in Korea, I'm able to have more access to research materials. And so yeah, I've been researching and writing that for the past year, and I am looking forward to the day where I'm finished the writing process and I can start talking about getting on to the filmmaking part of it. But that's what I've been consumed with.
Yay. Oh, I'm so excited to hear more. It's going to be on my radar for sure. So, yeah, that's sadly all we have time for today. Everyone, please go support Rice Boy Sleeps. If you live in Canada, you can currently stream it on Crave. If you're in the US, it's on VOD. I obviously can't recommend it enough, clearly. Anthony, is there anything you want to shout out at all? Anywhere people can keep up with your work?
I do have an Instagram account, but it's which is pretty neglected, but it does exist. My name will be popping up here and there, I'm sure, once I'm getting back to making movies. So I just hope that anyone who enjoyed Rice Boy Sleeps will take the time to watch other films that I make in the future.
Of course. Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it so much. Take care, and I'll talk to you again.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.